Okay, so contemplating impermanence, unsatisfactory nature, or dukkha, and selflessness gives us a lot of, it helps us to develop the motivation of renunciation and the determination to be free of cyclic existence. And those three meditations also act as the antidote to all our minds that are concerned and apprehensive about, well, what's going to happen if I actually go off and ordain? Yeah. So, these meditations serve multiple purposes. Because when we have strong renunciation, then we have the motivation to ordain. But then, as has come up in our discussion groups, we also have this other side that says, well, what about my family? What about my friends? And what about Coca-Cola and licorice? And what about movies? And what about pizza? And what about, what? Potato chips. And, And so, it's amazing how potato chips can derail liberation. That says something about the power of attachment, doesn't it? What about having a boyfriend or a girlfriend? What about having a house? What about having kids and security? Financial security. And what about, somebody taking care of me when I'm old? And, what about my 401k and my retirement plan and my Medicare and Medicaid? And, well, the government's going to take care of that anyway, especially with the Republicans in power, so might as well renounce them now. Excuse me. No, you don't have to. Actually, it's a very good example of how impermanent these things are. People spend so much time building up their retirement funds, and then the economy changes, and, all the money you thought you had, you don't have. Yeah? Or you spend a lot of time, I think Social Security is a wonderful program, but then the government cuts the benefits, and then you're stuck. And I was thinking when I visited the Soviet Union, when was that, 94? No, 96, that, there were all these, there were so many old people in the subways begging, and I was thinking during their youth, they worked so hard for the communist government, and the elders were taken care of then. Then they became, they changed the economy, and all these old people are, stuck. And they're in the subways begging. So, you spend a lot of time working hard for some things, but there's absolutely no security in them. Yeah? We can see it right here and now with what's happening. But I wanted to continue a bit with the Buddha's life, because these issues come out in the Buddha's contemplation too. They didn't have Medicare and 401ks at Buddha's time, but the same issues, And they didn't have Rambo and Miss America at Buddha's time, or Miss Canada or Miss Mexico, or, but they still had the same, the people had the same attachments, the same kind of false conceptions. Yeah. So sometimes the objects were slightly different, but the type of wrong conceptions, are exactly the same ones that we have now. Okay. So I wanted to read some passages from the sutra, because I think it's nice if you get some idea of how it's expressed in the suttas. Yeah. So this particular one is from the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses. So it's about the young prince. So Siddhartha, still in the palace, grows enchanted with his life of luxury. So this is the Buddha speaking. Monastics, I lived in refinement, utmost refinement, total refinement. My father even had lotus ponds made in our palace, one where red lotuses bloom, one where white lotuses bloom, one with blue lotuses bloom, all for my sake. So just, substitute Beverly Hills or, whatever is the rich area in the town you grew up with, and think of what the people have. I used no sandalwood that was not from Varanasi. My turban was from Varanasi. Varanasi is very well known for its silks and still is today. As were my tunic, my lower garments, and my outer cloak. A white sunshade was held over me day and night to protect me from cold, heat, dust, dirt, and dew. Okay, so Calvin Klein, Gucci, all the way. I had 3 palaces, one for the cold season, one for the hot season, one for the rainy season. During the 4 months of the rainy season, I was entertained in the rainy season palace by minstrels without a single man among them, and I did not once come down from the palace, whereas the servants, workers, and retainers in other people's homes are fed meals of lentil soup and broken rice. In my father's home, the servants, workers, and retainers were fed wheat, rice, and meat. Okay, so other people ate takeout. We ate, from the best restaurants. Even though I was endowed with such fortune, such total refinement, the thought occurred to me, when an untaught, run-of-the-mill person, himself subject to aging, not beyond aging, sees another person who is aging, he is horrified, humiliated, and disgusted, oblivious to himself that he too is subject to aging, not beyond aging. If I, an untaught, run-of-the-mill person, subject to aging, not beyond aging, were to be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted on seeing another person who is aged, that would not be fitting for me. As I noticed this, the typical young person's intoxication with youth entirely dropped away. Okay? So it's true when we're, common people and we ourselves are not beyond aging. We're aging in every split second. But when we go to a nursing home, we feel kind of squeamish looking at the old people there. It's, especially the people who are senile or suffer with Alzheimer's, or people who can't feed themselves, who maybe are just lying there almost in a stupor. Okay? And we feel kind of disgusted and feel yucky, about it. And yet we're completely oblivious to the fact that this is our own future if we live that long. And so this is what he's noticing, and he's saying, if I were to be like that, that is not proper. How can I feel squeamish at the sight of somebody who is undergoing what I will undergo because we're both in cyclic existence? And, sometimes when we have an older relative who is hospitalized, it's like, we don't want to go and visit. It's kind of creepy going in the hospital. And I think why is because we think, underneath, we know that that person's no different than us. But, on another level, it's like, well, I'm beyond all that. This is really unpleasant to look at. And it's unpleasant, because it does remind us that we're in for that. And so, here the Buddha is saying, if I were to think like that, that wouldn't be fitting at all. And so then his intoxication with youth dropped away. So we have this intoxication with youth, don't we? Yeah. And it doesn't end when you turn 30. Yeah. You can be 60 and you still feel young. In fact, your definition of old changes every year. Believe me. I remember being in my 20s, and I knew somebody who was 40 who was kind of cool, and I thought, wow, she's so old, but she's really, kind of a cool person. And now I look and like 40's really young. Yeah. But, 60 isn't too much older than 40, just a little bit, And 70 is, a long way away, long, long time until 70. Yeah? Okay? So your whole view, we have this intoxication with youth. That isn't just feeling I'm young, but, feeling that I'm healthy, that I'm strong, that I'm attractive, that I can do things, that I have my whole life in front of me, that the future is mine and my generation, that all these old fogies, 35 and above are just, over the hill. They don't know what they're talking about anymore. And we have this kind of intoxication with youth, right? Yeah? Yeah? And it's kind of amazing to be intoxicated with our youth when all this aging is like right in front of us, and we're seeing the examples, and, pretty soon our generation are going to be the old fogies. And just as like when I talk about the Vietnam War, you guys feel like, oh, with the dinosaurs. Sometimes when you talk about the Gulf War, the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, people are going to look like you in the same way as you look at the World War II vets, like, over the hill. Yeah? And the major things that are happening, people are going to say, wow, were you alive when 9/11 happened? How old are you now? And they're going to say, wow, you're really old. You were alive when that happened. But you feel like, now, well, I was young, I was just in school when that happened. And yeah, so it's amazing, this kind of feeling that we're beyond aging. We're never going to get old. We're never going to lose our physical abilities. Yeah? But we're in the process of losing them right now. And your mental abilities, too. Huh? What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So, okay. Even though I was endowed with such fortune, such total refinement, the thought occurred to me when an untaught, run-of-the-mill person, himself subject to illness, not beyond illness, sees another who is ill. He is horrified, humiliated, and disgusted, oblivious to himself that he too is subject to illness, not beyond illness. And if I, who am subject to illness, not beyond illness, were to be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted on seeing another person who is ill, that would not be fitting for me. As I noticed this, the healthy person's intoxication with health entirely dropped away. So we also have an intoxication with being healthy, don't we? Yeah, when we feel well, we can't imagine ever not feeling well. I mean, we might get a little anxious about it once in a while, but all those weird diseases, they happen to other people. Other people get cancer. They get kidney disease. They get, emphysema. They get whatever it is. All these weird things that relatives and friends write to you that they've got that, the doctors don't know how to diagnose. It's other people who get those diseases, not me. And yet the people who who are suffering with those diseases, that's what they thought too before they came down with the diseases. And when we're healthy, we can't imagine, what it would be like to all of a sudden get that kind of diagnosis and how that would change our life. And, how an illness would limit our abilities. We have this kind of oblivion and intoxication with being healthy. So they're both kind of a type of arrogance. An arrogance of being young, an arrogance of being healthy, that can't understand, why old people can't get it, why sick people just can't do what everybody else is doing. There's a certain kind of arrogance and judgment with it. But when we think, this is my future, then that arrogance falls away. And we see, wow, there's no difference between me and that person. Why? Because we're both under the control of afflictions and karma. We're both stuck in cyclic existence, and getting sick, aging, is the nature of cyclic existence. There's no way around it. Even though I was endowed with such fortune, such total refinement, the thought occurred to me when an untaught, run-of-the-mill person, himself subject to death, not beyond death, sees another who is dead. He is horrified, humiliated, and disgusted, oblivious to himself that he too is subject to death, not beyond death. And if I, who am subject to death, not beyond death, were to be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted on seeing another person who is dead, that would not be fitting for me. As I noticed this, the living person's intoxication with life entirely dropped away. Okay? So in a similar way, with death, we have this thing of, it doesn't happen to me. Or if it does, it's not today. It's not now. It's later. And then before you know it, death is right there. And when we see dead bodies, we're often horrified. In typical America, it's death is sanitized. In warfare, it's not. It's there right in front of you. In India, when you go to travel in India, you'll see a corpse in the train station. It's not unusual. Now, maybe not as often as before, but still, it happens now. You see dying people in the train station and the bus station. But we always feel that's not going to happen to me. Somehow death is, happens to other people. And to really imagine ourselves dying and leaving everything we have here, our nice, comfortable ego identity with everything we've created around us, that's really scary. And to ask ourselves, am I prepared to die? And what am I going to do when I die? I'm going into the complete unknown. How do I feel when I'm alive and I go into an unknown situation? And death is even more unknown. But we don't think about that. This is our ignorance. We block it out. And yet we're horrified and disgusted when we see the nakedness of death, not the sanitized version of death that we have in America, One of my friends' mothers was dying of Hodgkin's when I was in high school. And her mother finally killed herself, because it was just dying of Hodgkin's was too difficult. And at the funeral, of course, they embalmed her and everything. And I were hearing people say, "Oh, I never saw Adele look so well like that." That's how sanitized it is. Well, she looks so much more weller now than she did when she was alive. But this is, how we keep up the denial about what cyclic existence is. Okay, so here you can see, this is when the Buddha was in the peak of, all of his sense pleasure. And yet, seeing the old person, the sick person, the dead person, really affected him. And he began to say, well, this is for me too. And it's for everybody I care about, Everybody I care about is going to die. And have we actually thought about that? We thought about, our parents dying, or if you have kids, your kids dying, or your siblings dying, or, whoever it is you care most about, and thinking of that person dead. Do we think of that? Okay? So again, the Buddha isn't teaching this so that we can get depressed. The Buddha is teaching this so that we can wake up to the reality of our life. And I think as we wake up to this reality, a few things happen. One is we get the determination to be free of cyclic existence. So our spiritual motivation really increases. And two, we become, because we bring into consciousness the fact that we're going to get old and sick and die, we start preparing mentally for those states. We start thinking about how we can use the thought training practices to prepare. We start learning about the meditations to practice when we die, the meditations to practice when we're sick. Okay? And we start doing those. We start, learning the thought training meditations on how to transform adversity into the path. And in doing so, then these life events don't seem so fearful in the sense of the panicky fear. They still seem dreadful in terms of staying in samsara and experiencing this over and over again. But now we feel like at least we have some tools to deal with them. That doesn't make samsara any better, but it gives us some ability to feel that I've made some preparation so that when this happens, it's not going to be total freak out time. So that's good, Stop being so. You make preparation, then you know what to do. Then it's not so scary. Yeah. His Holiness says he practices because there's in Tibetan Buddhism, there's many meditations to do at the time of death. And there's one where we actually imagine going through the death process with the different visions and things that you happen at death. And His Holiness says that he practices that. I forget if he said 6 times a day or 8 times a day. Because it's an integral part of some of the committed practices that he does. Yeah. Okay. So here's another part. This is from the Majjhima Nikaya, where the young prince goes forth into homelessness. Before my awakening, when I was still an unawakened bodhisattva, the thought occurred to me, the household life is crowded, a dusty road. Life gone forth, in other words, life as a monastic, is the open air. It isn't easy living in a home. So to lead the holy life that is totally perfect, totally pure, a polished shell. No, not easy to do that when you're living at home. What if I, having shaved off my head and beard and putting on the saffron robe, were to go forth from the home life into homelessness? So at a later time, when I was still young, black-haired, endowed with the blessings of youth, in the first stage of life, having shaved off my hair and beard, Though my parents wished otherwise and were grieving with tears on their face, I put on the saffron robe and went forth from the home life into homelessness. There's this passage, every time I read it, I find it so moving, you know. Home life, or you'll hear the expression household life, that is typical life, yeah. You have your spouse and your kids and your ex-spouse, because that's what's happening nowadays, isn't it? More than 50% of the marriages end in divorce. Okay. You have your house, or at least you used to before it was foreclosed. You have your kids going to school, and you drive them to soccer games and to school games. You have your hobbies, you know, you have your golf lessons. You have your social life, you know, you have all the soap operas that you know, or sitcoms or whatever it is people watch. Maybe you watch your news 24/7. Yeah, infotainment. You live a normal American life. Yeah. And nowadays it isn't even necessary. You know, many people choose not to marry. They live together. Many people don't even live together. They still, you know, live on their own. Maybe as a single parent. And you have your regular life. And that's called the household life. You know, you get up, brush your teeth, go to work, come home, collapse in front of the TV or the computer. Yeah. Space out watching something. Yeah. Sometimes you don't even need a big TV screen or computer. You have your little iPhone. You just lean back in your chair and exercise your thumbs all evening, you know. This is a major thing of addiction now. If you watch, people cannot be separated from their iPhone, you know, or their iPod or iPad or whatever, you know, kind of major addiction, major attachment. I watch on airplanes. People are glued, you know, 2x4 contains the whole world. And they're glued until the flight attendant says, you have to turn it off now. They turn it off. As soon as they reach 10,000 feet, they come on again. Yeah, you watch your movies or whatever. Then you have to turn it off for landing. As soon as they land and the flight attendant says you can take them out, everybody is glued. Everybody is on the phone. And I'm sitting there watching them. I don't have one of these things, and I don't want one. But it's amazing to see, you know, the level of addiction people have to these things, you know. So, you know, this is normal life. This is the householder life. Now, you have your mortgage, you have your insurance payments. Yeah, you have payments for your kids' education, for this or that, or for them to go to summer camp, and, you know, you have to get them Nike shoes, and you have to get them this and that. Yeah, and Sunday evenings you go to your parents' house, or more likely you Skype your parents, so the kids can say hello to Grandma and Grandpa, and you get out of having to sit through a family dinner. Yeah, just regular life. And then you get up Monday morning and repeat the whole thing. Yeah. Smoke a little dope in the meantime. Drink a little bit when you get home. Gotta relax somehow. Yeah. Pull out whatever it is. I am not an alcoholic. This is just like medicine to relax me. Yeah. So I don't need tranquilizers. Those people who abuse prescription drugs, they're the ones with a substance abuse problem. You know, alcohol, it's just normal. All my friends are doing it. I don't get drunk anyway. I'm just relaxed. Right? Every day. Every day like that. But I am not an alcoholic. I do not have a drug or alcohol abuse problem. Okay? I just lose my temper once in a while. It has nothing to do with how much I'm drinking, so don't get on my case about drinking too much. Because I don't have an alcohol problem.
Huh.
Yeah. You're too critical. Get off my back. Right? Normal American life. Yeah. Yeah. Canadian life, Mexican life too, right? Right? Yeah. Okay. And so the Bodhisattva Siddhartha is thinking, it's not easy, you know, when you're living that kind of life, to lead the holy life that is totally perfect, totally pure, like a polished shell. Very difficult to lead this. This came out in some of our discussions yesterday, didn't it? You know, when you're in the middle of that, it's very difficult to sit down and do your Dharma practice. Especially if you're living in a house with other people, and, you know, they love you and they care for you and they want you to be involved in their lives, and you want to be involved in their lives, and you have commitments and responsibilities. I mean, once you have a kid, you have a commitment for the next 40 years. They don't always move out at 18 nowadays. Yeah? Yeah. And when you have a kid, it is total pot luck. I mean, really. You always think, oh, this is my kid, so they're going to be wonderful. They're going to be the most stupendous kid that's around. But first of all, you don't know if you're going to have a special needs kid, you know, a kid with Downs, a kid with some kind of birth defect or whatever. And how's that going to change your life? You don't know if you're going to have a kid who has really strong karma in, you know, quite a negative direction. Yeah. Kid that's going to be really out of control. You don't know if you're going to have Einstein, you know. It is total pot luck. Yeah. And when you have a kid, you're welcoming somebody into your house for the next 40 years, a total stranger. And you're accepting the responsibility to take care of that person. Yeah. It's a huge thing. Huge. And it completely changes people's lives. Yeah. But people often don't think about that. It's just, well, my friends are having a kid, I have a kid. What else is new? Yeah. It doesn't matter. I can be a single parent, no problem. Being a single parent easy? It's not. It's very difficult. Yeah. Okay? So, you know, Siddhartha is looking at this and he's saying, you know, this is really difficult. You know. And besides, when you have a job, they always want you to, you know, when they hire you, you have specific hours. Once you're there, they want you to work overtime. Yeah. And you better work overtime because you're easily replaceable. They can easily let you go, and lots of people who want your job instead. And you're really stuck. And what's hard is because you're so much in debt, you can't just walk out. It's not a thing of, okay, I quit my job and, you know, I can live on some savings or whatever. It's like people in this country have overspent and they're in so much debt. that they can't lose their job, because how are they going to pay off, the $15,000 that they owe to the credit card company, what are the rates now of interest per month? I don't know, 18-20% a month? It's just outrageous. Yeah, and so you're really stuck. Really stuck. And yet you can't control your craving because, other people are getting these new things and you want one too. Yeah, there's always some new technological widget that we got to have that's going to make our life easier, i.e. more stressed out. Yeah? And you got to have one, and your kids got to have one. And so you can't, you can't get out of debt because you always have to get these things. Because for your kids' sake, what's going to happen to your kids if they don't have everything that the neighbors' kids have? Oh dear, my kids are going to be made fun of. Their classmates are going to think them weird. I talk to parents who don't want their kids to watch TV. It's so difficult for them because their kids have so much pressure to watch TV and go on the internet and get, all this stuff. And it's so hard for the parents to say no. Yeah, because the kids run the families now. And you're a terrible parent if you don't give your kid whatever they want. Forget whether they need it. Forget whether we're using more than the Earth's resources, more than our share of the Earth's resources. Parents feel like they have to give their kids absolutely everything. Or else they feel guilty, like they're a bad parent. Yeah? So it's very difficult. So in that kind of situation, you're going to find time for meditation practice? Finding time to go to Dharma teachings, finding time to read a book, finding time to go on retreat. Very difficult. Very difficult. And even if you go on your retreat, you spend most of your time feeling guilty, like you should be back there with all the people who are depending on you. And you feel nervous because even if you don't have a family, when you go into work after your vacation, and people ask you where you are, and you say, well, I was at a meditation retreat. And they say, you were at a what? You spent your, 2 weeks or 1 week vacation time watching your belly button? Are you absolutely out of your mind? Go get a life. And so, it's difficult to say to your colleagues what you're doing because they think you're just weird to the moon. Yeah, you were lucky, but you had that apprehension beforehand, because that's what happens with most people, when they tell their colleagues at work. Yeah, and then you think, oh dear, all these people think I'm weird. They must be right. Yeah, I mean, we're so influenced by what society says, so influenced by what they think of me. I don't know who they is, but whoever they are, we don't want them to think bad of us. So all of our strong efforts, I'm really going to practice. Well, sorry, I can't make it to this retreat. I'll come to the next one. We hear that a lot, don't we? Yeah. Can't do this winter's 1-month retreat. I'll come next year. I'm quoting somebody. I think you know who I'm talking about. Then next year rolls around. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't come this year. I'll come next year. Yeah. So, very difficult. Very difficult. So the Bodhisattva's thinking about this, and the idea comes in his head. Well, what were to happen if I were to leave the home life and go into the homeless life? We call monastic ordination the homeless life because you don't have your own home and all the accoutrements that a home takes. Yeah, you don't have that. And so he says, what would happen if I cut my hair and shaved my beard? Because in India, in ancient India, the men had quite long hair. They had beards. Now most of them just have mustaches and their hair is short. But, same kind of thing. You change your appearance. You look different than everybody else. What were to happen if I were to do that and put on these ugly robes and go forth, from the home life into the homeless life? So he's asking himself, what would happen? What would happen? Well, on the home front, all hell breaks loose. Yeah? What happens on the spiritual level in terms of the long term? Yeah? You purify your mind, you create incredible merit, you listen to teachings, you meditate, you gain understandings, you progress along the path. And when you die, you know that you lived a life that was meaningful, that you were able to benefit people either directly or indirectly. That's what happens, but that's more intangible. Yeah. When you're monastic, you don't get certificates and trophies and awards to show what you've achieved. Yeah. In lay life, you get these markers that show, oh, you get an award for this, you get a medal, you get a certificate. Yeah. And then on, your office walls or your home walls, you display all of these. This is what I have accomplished. I don't even know where my college graduation certificate is. I can't even remember getting one. I was too stoned. But, yeah, you get all these things and they say, oh, I've accomplished this and that. You get your name in certain journals. It's funny, I just got somebody interviewed me for something and then they sent me a follow-up thing, about, and they're doing some kind of network thing, and like, what professional organizations do you belong to? Sravasti Abbey? As few as possible? I don't belong to any professional organizations. Huh? Even now you see some monastics when they have their card, it's like all these titles, head of the Buddhist organization of this, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I don't have anything. Yeah, but, we like that reinforcement from the outside, and to give that up and know that the true value and purpose and meaning of your life comes from what you do with your heart and mind. Because that's what's going to bring the long-term benefit. To really feel sure of that in your own heart when the people around you and your family don't see it that way. That's hard. Yeah, but you have to gain some inner conviction about about karma. Yeah? And about, observing cause and effect being a really important thing if you want to be happy in this life and future lives. And you have to, have solid conviction in that. And not a lot of interest in what other people think of you. Just whatever they think, they think. It's only their thoughts, isn't it? Only other people's thoughts. It's nothing more. Just because other people think it doesn't mean it's true. This is our problem, is we think that whatever we think is true, we think whatever everybody else thinks is true also. Just because somebody has an idea about you doesn't mean it's true. Okay? But we're very sensitive to those things. Okay, so he shaved off his hair and his beard and put on the saffron robes. though my parents wished otherwise and were grieving with tears on their faces. That one's the grabber, isn't it? It's like, oh my, I don't want to see my parents cry, you know. I love my parents. I don't want to do things that make them miserable. And they're crying because I'm getting ordained. You know? And then all of a sudden you go, well, Buddhism teaches a lot about compassion. I should have compassion for my parents. And the compassionate thing now is to stay at home and take care of them and lead the life that they want me to lead. I can get ordained in a future life. I can get ordained after my parents die. Yeah? That's assuming that they die before us, which is not certain. It's also assuming that we'll have a good future life, which if we don't purify and accumulate merit now, is not going to happen. Okay? So we twist the Dharma and say, oh, but I got to be compassionate for my parents, you know. And look, there's my mom crying, you know. There's my dad thinking, oh, where's my child? What's happening to my child? And then we feel so guilty. Mm-hmm. And we think all of that is coming from outside. Yeah. Our guilt is coming from in here, you know. We're the ones that are thinking in a certain way. And when we think like that, we're thinking in a very narrow way. First of all, we're assuming that if we live the kind of life our parents want to live, that our parents will be happy. Is that true? Are you able to make your parents everlastingly happy by living the kind of life they want you to live? Even suppose that you were happy living that kind of life, you know? Because even in a normal way, they may have ideas for you. You know, they want you to go into one profession and not another profession. So even in that way, yeah, even if you did everything they wanted, yeah, are they going to be happy? Are they going to be completely satisfied? Is that ever going to happen? No, that's not going to happen, is it? Yeah. What's going to happen instead is we're going to be creating a lot of negative karma out of attachment, out of anger, you know. Won't have any time to do any purification practices. Have very little time to create merit. Maybe give a donation here or there. Very little time to create merit. And then what happens at the time of death? And where do we get reborn? Yeah? And if we have a lower rebirth, we can't even help ourselves, let alone be of any benefit to our parents. Yeah? If we practice the Dharma and we progress along the path, then, because of our karmic connection with our parents of this lifetime, and if we make strong dedication prayers, then we can benefit our parents directly in future lives by teaching them the Dharma and leading them on the path. But if we don't, you know, progress on the path ourselves, how are we going to help them progress along the path? And without progressing along the path, all of us are just going to keep going around and around and around in samsara. Again and again and again, going through birth, aging, sickness, death. You know? So you really have to think in a long-term perspective about these kinds of things. No. And so that's why this is a very, very moving passage for me, you know, because you really see that he's seeing things very clearly and has a very courageous mind and a very dedicated mind to the practice, you know, and I find that so moving. You know, And of course, his father was going nuts, his mother was going nuts, his wife was going nuts, his baby was crying. Yeah. Everybody in the palace was going, oh, And what's really funny, when you get ordained when you're young, people think, it's such a waste of time and good energy. Yeah. I remember when I first got ordained, I went down to Dharamsala to get some cloth. I needed a new robe. And the Indian man at the store, when oh, you're so young, you're so pretty, why did you do something like that? I was young, I wasn't pretty, but people think anybody who's young is good looking, It's true, isn't it? Yeah. When you're young, you're very discriminating about who's good looking and who's not. When you get older, anybody who's young is good looking. Yeah. I'm like, it's true, isn't it? Yeah. and then people say, what a waste, When you're good looking, you should go out and have some fun, Yeah. Why are you being celibate? Are you out of your mind? Yeah. Especially in this society, they think you're totally nuts if you're celibate. Yeah. You must be avoiding relationships. You must be, sexually dysfunctional, or you must be who knows what. People make up all sorts of weird things because they themselves can't imagine being celibate. So anybody who's celibate must be crazy or screwy or whatever. Yeah. It's okay if they think that. So, yeah, that's interesting. Any questions? Yeah. Oh, okay. This last one was Majjhima Nikaya, the middle-length discourses, Sutra number 36. And then the first passage I read was the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses, and it was Sutra 3.38. Okay. Other questions? Okay. We'll dedicate. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.